Good.
Great job.
You. Good evening and welcome to our first meeting in November. It will be our last meeting in November. I don't think we meet again until December. I'd like to welcome those of you watching us on our Electric City Television. Our invocation tonight will be given by Councilman Matt Harbin, and I will lead us in respectful pledge. Please rise.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to live in a free country. I pray for this elected council, our elected county council, our state leaders, and our national leaders, that you will guide us to make decisions that will be pleasing in your eyes. I pray for our administrative team, our fire and police, and other employees of the city for their safety, and guide them in making decisions. I pray for our country during this pandemic, that we will heal from this virus, and we also heal as a country as we unify together to continue to make this a great country. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The minutes of our last meeting, October 26th meeting, have been distributed. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Mayor, I move they're accepted.
First by Mr. Roberts, Jeff Roberts.
Second.
Second by Mr. Chapman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes of October 26th pass unanimously. Having no old business, we'll move directly to new business. And our first item of new business is request consideration of an ordinance extending the emergency term of Ordinance 20-24, extended by Ordinance 20-26 regarding face coverings. Mr. McEwen?
Mr. Mayor, Council, this item before you being presented is the possible extension to the face covering ordinance that we have previously extended for 60 days prior. And so first, before we get into the details of this, I want to give you the latest numbers as we do from time to time and in consideration of an ordinance like this. Director David Baker here and is here to present those numbers to you, has a presentation for you, and to answer any questions that you have. And we're also, if you could get on the big screen too, that'd be great. So I'll turn it over to Director Baker. Dave.
Mayor, Council, appreciate the opportunity again to come speak with you today and give you the updated numbers for the COVID-19 for Anderson City. As you can see on the slide, it says City of Anderson impact. These numbers will show you both some state numbers, some county numbers, as well as specifically to the city when we talk about zip codes and things like that. So to kind of jump into it a little bit, I think it was a month and a half ago, close to 2 months since it's been the last time I was up here. And I believe our counts were at that time steady on the increase. We did since that time see some decrease in our daily numbers, and here recently starting to see a rise again. And that's going to be probably contributed to several factors, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But looking at the numbers, we'll start talking about the dailies. So if you look at the numbers for the county, respectively, the first four are the City of Anderson. 225 is your present number, but to the right you see increase 3. So today there was an increase in some numbers there, but because of the 10-day expiration for the quarantine time, we might have had more numbers come off than we had added on. So when you see negative numbers, that kind of explains that to you. And then, like when you get down to 29625 and 29626, you'll see in the green a +5 and a +1. That tells you that there were more numbers that came on than went off. You know, even though for 29625 there might have been more than 5 cases, there might have been some that came off that offset it. So, but you know, the previous number again was 225. Taking away 3s, 222, 34 and 1s, 33, 113, adding 5s, 118, and 15 adding 1s, 51. So those are your Anderson City numbers, and we'll get a little bit more into it in just a moment. Our total event total for all of Anderson County is 6,128 total confirmed cases, and that also includes probable cases as well. Currently, we have 5,182 active cases, which means there are 753 inactive cases. To date, we have 193 total deaths for Anderson County. So when you look at these, this particular chart, you'll see, starting back in March, where we had, kind of that low case count. The reality is we knew those cases were much higher, but we didn't have a lot of testing going on. We kind of felt that, and even talked about it way back then, and since then, that we know, we're a little more realistic that up until probably around June, that, we didn't really start getting a lot of big testing going on here in Anderson County. Since those dates, you see the increase in numbers, obviously. August 1st was our highest peak and spike. That's when we probably had the greatest number of local open testing that was going on. That's been pretty consistent since then. And you can see those numbers since August the 1st, all your peaks and your valleys. When we get somewhere around September, you can start seeing that those high peaks kind of drop a little bit. And then we had a few spikes in there. You'll see in the red, there are a lot of probable cases. Probable cases that are added on to our confirmed for those dates adds to our case count. So some of those probables could be several weeks old. So they might have been outside of that 10-day period, which wouldn't give you what I would say an accurate number for that particular date, but an accurate number for that total for that event. And then as we start kind of increasing from about mid-October, you'll see those peaks going up a little bit, and at the upper end of those, you'll see the red, which are probable cases added. And then when we start getting in November, over the last 10 to 12 days, we're starting to see some of those peaks and spikes. And when we get here to the next slide, this is our 7-day moving average. So again, looking back at March, getting up to July, you start seeing the peak. August the 1st was our highest peak. November the 1st, that looks like we almost made it back to where we were back in August for high peak. And that has a lot to do, and you'll see in just a few moments, but that has a lot to do with some of those daily spikes. We had a couple of days where we had a lot of numbers that were pretty high for those days. And those were kind of combined, not only confirmed cases, but probable cases also to make those a good bit higher. And there's no doubt we have had an increase, as you can see from November the 1st. All right, our 10-day trend, and again, when we talk about our spikes, we're at 44 cases the 31st, which was a week ago Saturday, 97 cases the following day, then down to 32, 61, 31, 41, 77, 88, 35, and 31. And when you see these quick spikes, that's what you're seeing in those real quick jut-ups, going back to this prior slide, where you see this consistent from November the 1st to date. It doesn't look like there's a lot of movement. When you go from, a 60 to a 90 to a 30, and this is a substantial drop. It just doesn't show up on that graph. So it's a little misleading. And then when we get into our daily positive cases from March 15th until current, we're looking at, you can kind of see how that timeline goes. It's again, getting back to the highest peak of being August the 2nd. And around September, you can start seeing the slow decrease. And one of the things that we do is not only monitor our DHEC numbers, which we get daily from DHEC as well as national numbers through CDC, but we also monitor our local numbers through InMed Hospital, which is very important numbers for us, because that gives us a good idea of what we have admitted into the hospital being treated for cases, how many are in ICU, and how many ventilators are being utilized and things like that. That's very important information for us. And it's kind of neat because as we see the increase in cases, obviously their numbers are rising as far as inpatient. And then as cases decrease, we naturally will see a decrease in cases within the hospital. That's remained consistent today. Around about a month and a half ago, we were up and around the 60s, was about our daily average, give or take 60s, high 50s. To total admitted into AMED, and then up into the 20s and the upper 20s for those in an ICU type treatment area there. Our latest numbers for AMED for today's date is 39 in ANMED for total, and then 15 in ICU. So that's substantially less than 60, but just a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at about 20 total and somewhere in the single digits in ICU. So naturally, what we're seeing is, that first week in November, to date, our increases in cases shows as well there in ANMED with their caseload as well. Getting back to your zip codes, your local zip codes, this is specific to the city. You can see that from October the 27th to date, it's an increase in 62 cases, 29624. To date, that's an increase, I believe, in 17 cases. That's almost double from 16 to 33. 29625 went from 85 to 118, which is an increase in 33 cases for a daily count. And 29661, we have an increase of 21, and that's for the entire zip code. All right, then getting into the total deaths, I believe we're at number 8 in the state for deaths to date. Our death count is still very consistent with what they forecasted. It would be the vulnerable, would be the elderly, folks with underlying health conditions and things of that nature. So we've had 193 deaths today. And what we are seeing too is they're going back and actually adding some numbers to the death count when they're getting positive results from individuals that did pass away, maybe on a prior day, a delay in testing. So we have seen some jumps and increases a little bit in some of those numbers as well. And again, these are things that we're still pushing out to people, the same general messages, on good hygiene, social distancing, things of that nature. And this is, when you want to make decisions on what to do about a mask, this is a pretty valuable slide to tell you what, where the risks are and how you determine what's high, moderately high, low, and very low. And I will tell you, based on some of the other numbers that we have seen throughout the state, not just in Anderson County, even though you're seeing an increase in cases here where you got 62 total cases increased in a week here, I've seen zip codes in other counties not too far from us that they're having as much of an increase just in one zip code that you're having in the entire city of Anderson. So I will tell you, your mask ordinance is certainly working. And I would say that, based on the decisions that you need to make, you've got, I think, some good substantial numbers possibly to make those decisions. But certainly welcome to answer any questions for you.
Thank you, Director Baker. I just would, I think, my fellow council members, we would publicly appreciate your work during the last 8 months of this pandemic. I'll open it up to questions. Yes, sir.
Question.
Ms. Harvey.
Thank you, Director Baker, for the information. I always find it interesting and very enlightening. And you might not know the answer to this. And what is the average for our area that are tested that test positive?
So somewhere around 8 to 10% is what our early rates were. And it just depends, because some days you'll see those testing rates increase, sometimes it'll decrease. Unfortunately, you also get a lot of private labs that won't report until later on, maybe, into the first part of the week, where those numbers, where you'll see that quick spike. And again, that's another thing that kind of lends to the spikes as well. It also lends to a false sense of a percentage for that particular time period, because you might be getting a 4 and 5 day old test, on a Tuesday or a Wednesday that took place on a Saturday or Sunday. But I would say right now we're probably around the 9 to 10% total. But again, what we are seeing right now is a lot of individuals being tested too. So
that's what I was sort of, when we first came, we were just barely testing it.
Yes,
Seems like testing has accelerated, a good bit. I'll go by, you talk about the private labs, there's one on 81, and I'll go by at certain times of day, and there'll be cars lined up, somebody standing out in the parking lot,
yes,
testing. The second question, and you probably know this number, what is the average infection rate per population nationwide?
I couldn't answer that question for you today. I could not answer that for you. However, I will tell you that it is much higher than what we're experiencing here locally.
Yeah.
And we can see that just throughout the state here.
Yeah, that's what, I when I did crunch the numbers, it looked like, even though we're a little bit high in that, everything in the state of unfortunately, fatalities, the infection rate is still lower
It is.
per capita. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on it.
Anything else, guys? Ms. Chapman?
So in your, I think, was it 6,100 people have tested positive or either tested positive or have had it in some way?
Yeah,
Do y'all separate asymptomatic versus symptomatic?
we do not. The numbers that we get reported to us from DHEC are specifically what's positive cases and probable.
So the difference between probable and positive is
Would
what?
be your asymptomatic individuals or individuals that displayed symptoms that might have given maybe multiple tests, a positive and a negative, where there might have been an offset where that somebody in the lab would make a decision whether to
Because I still believe that part of the problem is that I know some individuals who have tested
Yes, sir.
positive but had no symptoms whatsoever.
Yes, sir.
And some of us who haven't been tested could have had it,
Absolutely.
never knew it, but I think that's the part that we need to try to, it seems like we'd be tracking the asymptomatic versus the symptomatic,
Sure.
just so we know 50% of the population who's got it
Yes, sir.
doesn't really have any symptoms or whatever that number is.
And I'll add to that. So when we test with DHEC, when we work with Director Baker here, we send folks directly to a DHEC site, actually run a DHEC site to be tested. And they do ask those questions if you're symptomatic and try to grab that data. But there's other testing sites that don't, they just test you. And so that data's kind of coming from all over the place. So DHEC's data would be interested, and the actual people they actually test and run the facilities would be interested to look at to see, okay, because they would actually know that number, so we could look at to say, okay, how many tested positive that said they were not symptomatic, and vice versa.
Right.
So they're capturing that.
They are, okay.
Right.
It's just not going
They're
to
in that.
Yeah, it's just not going to be super.
We're not getting that off their dashboard.
Okay.
But that's something we can ask for. Take a
I-
look at it, yeah.
I just think that's, because I know several individuals who tested positive that had zero symptoms, and they were out for quite a while before they realized they needed to get tested.
Yes.
You got some?
Yeah.
Dr. Thompson?
I want to ask, how much does it cost to do a test at ANMED? And are there other sites around the city now that still doing testing?
Okay, yes, ma'am. There are some free sites that, it's my understanding, DHEC's still doing one outside their building, in the parking area. There are some sites that are coming up once a week, twice a week that are available throughout the county where individuals can drive up and be tested. There are some private labs that are doing some testing. I've heard anywhere from $85 up to $200. Just depends on the type of the test that they do, whether they do lab service in-house or whether they have to farm it out, things of that nature. So, and a lot of them are, will file insurance and things of that nature. And Med's test numbers, I can't tell you what they charge, unfortunately.
It would be good if this information was out. We get calls all the time. Are you testing at Westside Community Center? And we're not, but I don't know always whether to tell them to go to get maybe a free test,
Yes, ma'am.
or to go to ANMED and pay for a test.
Yes, ma'am. So DHEC does advertise where testing sites are going to be frequently. We try to pick that up and put that out as well as often as we can on our information. So folks, within the county and certainly within the city have the opportunity to see where testing sites will be. Again, almost daily, DHEC there in Anderson, right behind the sheriff's office next to DSS, is doing it in their parking lot out there.
But if you go to ANMED, how much does it cost?
I don't know, ma'am.
They have different costs.
Yes, ma'am.
There too, well, I understand.
Anything else, guys? Jeff?
Director Baker,
Yes, sir.
how would you rate from a purely public policy
Yes, sir.
standpoint, our ordinance and in its effectiveness?
Okay, so I would say, first of all, based on the population here in Anderson City proper, keep in mind, it wasn't too long ago, it was forecast that 29621 was going to be the highest number in the whole upstate. I probably remember that. The news actually ran a story on that. Obviously, if you look at those numbers, they've increased, but they're certainly nowhere near what was projected. So I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you took a very proactive approach in how how the city of Anderson was going to stand and protect your citizens. I will tell you this too, I've been out in downtown Anderson, both during the daytime hours and the evening hours, and seen a very good reaction to the citizens that are outside, that are visiting businesses and things like that. The last time I was here, probably 2/3 of the people we were seeing going into Lowe's, Home Depot, and I'm just using some of those stores as an example, but grocery stores, some of the malls and things like that, they were wearing masks. Now almost everybody is. So everybody's, taking ownership and doing their part. So we certainly, even though we're seeing an increase in numbers, I believe as far as Anderson City is concerned, your numbers would have been substantially higher had you not had a good mask ordinance in place.
I will say, all studies would be looked at, and criticized and so forth, but the Municipal Association did have a study of cities that passed the mask ordinance and its effect on the current rate in the data. It was around August, they looked at August and September, the ones that passed it versus the ones that didn't. And according to their review of it, it did have an impact on those numbers at least, and the jurisdictions that did pass it versus the jurisdictions that didn't, they saw a greater increase relative to the population at the time.
Good.
I can share that with you. They sent out a little article about that.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments?
One last. It's obvious that you work for Anderson County.
Yes, sir.
But the county hasn't enacted anything. Is that just from what? I mean, it seems a little bit difficult because we have a lot of people from the county that come in, and so we're trying to protect some
Sure.
of those businesses and things, but it seems like we could do a greater, if the numbers are if the data is showing that our mask ordinances are working in your eyes,
Sure.
it seems like from a countywide, they would do even better.
Yes, sir. That's on the political side of things, and I can't answer that certainly, but I will tell you there's been some discussion, as far as masks are concerned countywide.
Okay.
Good point. Anything else, guys? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Director Baker. So the ordinance that's before you is to extend the ordinance. Currently, the ordinance expires on the 61st day from the day of the enactment, so that's November the 22nd, 2020. This ordinance would extend it for another 60 days, beginning November the 23rd, and take it to ending January the 22nd, 2021. And this is first reading before you in order to require one reading as an emergency ordinance.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Make a motion that we extend the ordinance another 60 days.
Second.
I have a first by Mr. Stewart, second by Dr. Thompson. Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
David, refresh my memory on if there is a county-wide ordinance passed between now and January 21st, if there's a statewide ordinance or law passed, and if there is a national law passed between now and January 1st.
Yeah, so county ordinances only apply to unincorporated areas not within a municipality.
Okay.
So none of their ordinances have any bearing or legislative authority within the city.
Okay.
A state ordered by a master that is
Okay.
legal would be, and it would be enforceable as they've done in the past by local law enforcement, and they put that in their provisions. It is my understanding there's a challenge to that versus if there was a federal mandate, could they actually impose that upon the state? I don't believe so. I'll leave that to people and attorneys that have greater insight into that.
Anything else? Good question. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is request consideration of a paving resolution to Anderson County, the Anderson County Transportation Committee, and the South Carolina Department of Transportation. Ms. McEwen?
Mayor, City Council, from time to time, we put before you a recommendation and a list of local street paving and then suggested state street paving. And the reason I use the word suggested is because they can ultimately do their own thing on the roads that they own and pay. But it's been very helpful, for you guys in the past to adopt this and push the roads to be paved within the city of Anderson. And, so this will be go before the CTC committee. I'll ask Mr. Maurice McKinney to go into the details of it, how it works with the CTC committee each round. So, Mr. McKinney.
Thank you. As the city manager mentioned, each year we come to you with repaving resolutions and priority lists for local and state roads, and we forward these resolutions to Anderson County, the Anderson County Transportation Committee, and also the SCDOT. And as Mr. McKeown mentioned, it's always our hope that these lists will help provide direction for these agencies when they create their own paving list and paving priorities. And specifically, the Anderson County Transportation Committee, the ACTC, which is the agency that channels gas tax funds for local paving projects, they require that we submit to them a paving priority list and also a resolution in order to be considered for funding. And next month, we will be planning to submit an application to the CTC for funding for the upcoming year. At the present time, we don't know how much money will be available, when it'll be available, or anything like that, but at least our application will be to them for their consideration when it is time for them to move forward with that. And each year, we've done this for a few years now, we've used the SCDOT's weighted ranking system when we create our local and state paving priority lists. And obviously, it takes into consideration pavement condition of streets, but it also takes into consideration other things such as average daily traffic, the economic impact of a particular street in the area, and also the population affected by these particular streets. So before you tonight are 3 resolutions, one to the ACTC, one to Anderson County, and one to the SCDOT. And in those resolutions, there are a list of the main streets on the top of our list. We have a database of well over 200 streets of local and state roads, but we don't see the need to submit all of those, obviously. So we take the top streets on both lists and submit to them. So we do, as a staff, recommend that you move forward with adopting these resolutions. And just a side note, if you do adopt these tonight, there are 3 in there for your signatures as they pass around.
Thank you, sir. I think hopefully we looked at the list of the streets in all 3 entities. Questions, Mr. Stewart?
Maurice, I know that, and I apologize if I missed it, you sent it out, but I know in years past that you would, send us a list, letting us know if there's any additional streets that may have slipped through that we know about, that to see where it would rank on here. And is it something that's going to go through, or and I know one street that it's not in my district, but Beechwood, around back behind the ballpark down there, it's real bad, a lot of substandard houses, a lot of potholes in it, and so it's a couple other streets that come to mind, but just didn't know. I don't know if they're state road, county roads, and I don't know if we have that discretion. I think didn't the county at one time give us a allocation of dollars, and we pick and choose what roads we want to pay based upon that allocation they give us?
Or right now, really the monies we get for local streets are through the Anderson County Transportation Committee, and obviously the DOT, they take care of the state roads. Beechwood that you mentioned, that is a state road, so that would be subject to the approval by the DOT. I don't have the entire list with me, but Beechwood is on that list, but to tell you exactly where it is, I don't have that in front of me.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
So this last go around, I was very happy to hear, all of Calhoun Street got paved pretty much all the way out, but unfortunately it got cut right after it was paved because we had a sewer incident or sewer issue. Does our sewer department look at the ones that are high on the priority and check to make sure, maybe run a camera to see if there's any issues before the roads are paved?
Yes, sir. We work with the agencies that fund it, and when they provide the list of approved streets, Our utilities will double check and see what's taking place out there if something needs to be repaired. Sometimes with state roads, I'm not going to say we're surprised by it, but we may not find out about their priority list and what they plan on paving until a little later in the game. Now, with this particular situation, I'm not sure what happened, if it's something that nobody would have known about. I'm not real certain about the particular incident that you're talking about, but we do try to coordinate any type of utility improvements prior to a street review.
Right next to the university,
Okay,
right there at Boulevard.
gotcha. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Make a motion that we accept the resolution before us, or
Yep.
Second.
We have a first by Mr. Stewart, second by Mr. Chapman. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Our next item of new business is request consideration of accommodations tax, better known as the A-tax. Advisory Committee funding recommendation. Ms. McEwen?
Yes, this year, this item comes before you from our ATAS advisory committee, which is a volunteer committee, representative of the hospitality industry. And Ms. Kimberly Spears, our development director, will present the item to you, and she was involved in the process. Ms. Spears?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This year, the city received 26 applications for projects requesting ATAX funds. The city's total to allocate this year is $149,641.23. The total amount requested by these organizations was $186,400. You should have a spreadsheet of ATAX committee's recommendations and also a summary of each of the applicants in your packets. In making these recommendations, the committee gave consideration to the applicant's tourism track record, data collection, and substantiation of advertising and promotion expenses, economic benefit, and other funding sources, and also ability to attract and sustain tourism. Another weighted factor was the geographic location where the ATAX dollars originated within the city limits and the likelihood of continuing to leverage those dollars within the city. Based on these criteria, and especially the ability to generate tourism, the ATAX committee has recommended the distribution of $149,641.23 to the 26 project applicants. Administration would recommend designating one of the grant requests for $12,000 amount from the CVB advertising to be restricted to the wayfinding project. The staff concurs with these recommendations and thanks the committee for their time and genuine interest in allocating these dollars appropriately. Committee members are Dwayne Bowes, City Suttles, John Doolittle, Shelton Pace, Summer Fredette, Reggie Hawthorne, and Vicki Culler. And I just want to say a special thank you to Vicki Culler. She's served on the APAC committee for right at 20 years, but she's going to roll in December. So if you know Vicki, please let her know. We sure appreciate her support.
Where does she work at?
She was in the arts and culture.
Arts and culture.
Arts and culture, so she's retired.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Mr. Stewart?
I noticed out of all these applications, applicant number 10, which is Shakespeare in the Park, they just mentioned, that due to COVID that it was canceled last year. So out of all these other 25 applicants, you mean last year every one of them took place?
No, a lot were canceled, but we were able to.
I was just trying to figure out which one was canceled and which one wasn't. This was the only one that has a note on it that says this one was canceled. So now I know the Main Street Car Show was canceled and different others. So I didn't know if all of these got canceled, how many?
Not all of them because of the way the fiscal year works. So the block party actually had a portion of their regular programming. All those programs that happen, like the Christmas tree lighting and some of the other fall programs, even into the winter programs, those happened. But yes, there were a fair number that were canceled.
So out of the ones that were canceled, all the ones that were canceled, that's where the $24,452 came from?
Yes, sir. Yes, Yes, sir. Those are rollover funds, so we're able to re-put those back into the fund. And that would apply this year if you were unable to have the event that you're asking for. We'd be able to roll over those funds and put them back into the pot for next year.
Thank you.
Anything else? Good question.
I make a motion to approve this, Mayor.
First by Mr. Corbin,
Second.
second by Mr. Jeff Roberts. Further discussion?
Just like to thank all of our volunteers for serving on this board.
Good point. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, appreciate that. Mayor, at this time, we had this item to also talk about in the executive session. We were unable to do that due to time constraints of starting this meeting. Talk with the attorney, Mr. Rossi, that it's okay if we return to executive session to finish the discussion of that item so that it can be considered under the item B4.
Thank you.
Make a motion, we go into executive session.
First by Mr. Stewart,
Second.
second by Mr. Jeff Roberts. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand in executive session. In executive session, we reviewed item B4,
Yes, sir.
and that's request consideration of a resolution considering to the assignment of the rights of J.B. Ferguson Properties LLC and Estate Planning Consultants Incorporated in the Infrastructure Credit Agreement of January 1st of 2018 to 201 South Murray LLC. Ms. McEwen?
Mayor, City Council, in discussion of this item, and consideration of the transfer of the assignment of that, we do recommend an amendment to the resolution for your consideration within your motion. The city attorney will provide the language for that amendment to the resolution.
Based on our assessment, the resolution would provide for the approval of the acceptance of the assignment of the infrastructure credit agreement to 201 Murray Avenue LLC, with the additional provisions that the agreement would be amended to allow the project to have 100% rental residential properties, and also to provide that the project be substantially completed within a 3-year period.
Any questions, comments?
No, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve this.
That was first by Mr. Harvin,
Second.
second by Dr. Thompson, based on the city attorney, Mr. Roberts.
Just a point of clarification, what if market climate changes and they want to go back to that event center? This language allow for that?
And we'd have to bring it back to you for additional amendment.
So it's all residential or,
And that,
or not?
that complies with the law concerning the multi-county.
Because the way it's currently written,
Yeah.
it allows for some residential and an event center, but now this changes it to all residential.
Well, actually, the body of the agreement itself didn't say, it just said, whereas Mr. Ferguson was intending to have an event center and rental properties. That's part of the agreement that refers to that. I think to make it clear, it should be in there that we're approving that change.
Do you understand my question, though?
We
Is
want to
it-
go back to the event center later on, we have to go back.
I think since we're amended, you have to come back and we'll amend it.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
First by Dr. Thompson, second by Mr. Jeff Roberts. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.